Hi everyone, I wanted to show you how I made the label for my baby mandrake jar. So first of all, what I did is I took a piece of paper that I cut it into a label shape. This is just bog standard printer paper. I put a border of glue around the back because I wanted to be able to press on it and create like an indentation to make it look like it used to be like a label that was embossed. Then I took a mixture of brown, green and grey, mixed it with a lot of water and used that to discolour the label and make it look all manky and disgusting. I used my finger to rub over where the glue was underneath to give it that sort of embossed look, like so. And then also, because the paper's wet now, it means I can wrinkle it up a lot better. So you'll see in a bit after I've finished painting it, I scrunch it up to make it really wrinkly. Here what I'm doing is I'm just touching up some edges and adding a bit more colour and just pressing into the shape. And then once I'm quite happy with, I was quite happy with the shape of the label by basically I've pressed all around the edges where the glue is to make that sort of embossed area show up. And then I started using different shades of the colours I'd mixed. So there was one that was like a sort of greyish, like a greyish water, a browny coloured water, a slightly greeny water, and I applied mixtures of both to the piece of paper. Basically you want to soak the paper as much as you can because the wetter it is, the more tatty and disgusting you can make it look. And then I'm just dabbing the colours in different places. I don't want it to be like a uniform, neat colour. I want it to look patchy and mottled and disgusting. So I'm just dabbing here and there with the colours. And I use a mixture of all the colours and also add plenty of water to it as well. Basically, I'm painting on it with paint water, basically, to create these dingy looking colours. And then I'm using a dark grey around the edges. I wanted the edges to look really tatty, really dirty. I want it to look like this label's been on this mandrake jar for a long time. So I want it to look like faded and gungy, and I also add a bit of moss and stuff to it later on as well because I want it to look really, really disgusting. And then because the paper's nice and wet, I just scrunched it up as much as I could, trying not to rip it too much. It doesn't matter if it does rip because obviously that adds to the effect, but I didn't want to completely destroy it. So as you can see, it looks really nice and wrinkly and disgusting. And then the next thing I did was start to dry it off a bit. And to dry it off a bit, just so I could hurry up and stick it on the jar, I just used my heat gun. You could just leave this to dry, to be honest, but I just wanted to use the heat gun to speed up the process. So all I'm doing is just very lightly going over it with the heat gun. It doesn't take a lot, like it'll dry in seconds with a heat gun. Use one that's low power. Don't use like one that you use for like stripping paint because you could burn the paper. And obviously using the heat gun does make the glue off the back soften, and it did make it come off in places, so I did have to repair the glue. And as you can see, I got the glue, accidentally put my finger on the glue and pulled off a chunk of it, but never mind. By then I'd got that sort of embossing type of look to it, so I'd got the effect I wanted anyway, so it wasn't a big problem. But I just went over it with my glue gun and just stuck back down the bits of glue that was left. And then once I'd done that, then it was just a case of finishing off drying the label. I didn't worry about painting the back of the label because no one's ever going to see that because that's going to be stuck to the jar. And obviously if it was an old label and it's stuck to a jar anyway, the back side would be cleaner anyway. So I didn't need to worry about making it look really gungy and horrible on the back. I just held it a second and just blew on it a little bit just to make sure that glue set, and then turned it back over. Then once I was happy with it, I just made sure that I finished off drying it because it was still a bit damp in the middle. And obviously I need to write on this to make it a label. And I can't do that when the paper's wet. So I just very lightly went over it with the heat gun again, just in the middle section, just to make sure that that was nice and dry, ready for writing on. It doesn't matter if it's slightly damp, but it's better to be dry and then smudge the ink later than try and write over wet paper, because it's just going to rip and tear. And what I did first of all is I was going to do it in my pen straight away, but then I decided to plan it out a bit better, to get the words spaced out a bit better. And what I did is I've wrote the Latin name for mandrake, because mandrake is actually a real plant. It is used in traditional witchcraft and stuff. But I'll go into that another day on a Wicca Wednesday. And it's Mandragora officinalis. Yeah, I think that's how you pronounce it. There are two types. I just picked that one because I like the name of that one. There's another version as well, which is, let me have a look on my phone where I wrote it down. There's Mandragora officinalis and Mandragora autumnalis. So I chose Mandragora officinalis because I like the sound of that better. And basically what it is there's an old person, there's a person from many years ago who documented it in about the medicinal uses of mandrake and stuff, and he described a male and a female mandrake, because the reason they're called mandrake is because they look like, the way the root system forms is it looks like little people. And he described it as a male and a female version of the mandrake, whereas what it is, it's two different species, which is Mandragora officinalis and Mandragora autumnalis. But like I said, I'll go into that a bit more in a Wicca Wednesday. And once I wrote the name in pencil on my label, I went over it in my pen. This is just a little black calligraphy pen thing. I didn't worry about whether it was waterproof or not, because if you can smudge the ink, it works even better. And I went over my letters, and luckily the pen wasn't working very well on the painted surface, but that's what I wanted. I didn't want it to look like perfectly written print over the top of a tatty label, because it just would look weird. And I went over all the writing, and then I did actually dab over the top here and there with a bit more of my really watered down greyish black paint water, just to make it look like that's been on the label for a long time, and then went over any bits that needed going over, because I still wanted to be able to read the label, even though I wanted it to be very like faded and smudgy. Then once I was happy with the label, it is browner in real life. For some reason on camera it looks a bit lighter. I decided to add another little tear to it, and then obviously you have to paint the tear because you want it to look like an old tear. So I just dabbed a bit of paint along the tear and then dabbed it with my finger. I added a bit more black here and there, like, well, very watered down black, just to make it look more faded. And then it's a case of gluing it to my mandrake jar. And to glue it to the jar, I just used hot glue, and I glued it down. And the way I glued it so I didn't stick down the very edges. So it's got plenty of glue in the middle to make sure the label's not going to come off, but the edges aren't glued down very well, because I want it to look like the label is starting to peel off. I want it to look like, you know, at any minute that label could fall off the jar, sort of thing. That's the kind of look I was going for. So a couple of edges are stuck down, but the rest of it I've just glued the middle. And where I'd put that band of glue on the back to create the embossing effect, that's basically where I glued a lot of the label down, is I used that and glued in the centre. And I made sure I didn't glue the corners down properly. So as you can see, the label looks like it's sort of half peeling off. It's lifting up off the jar to make it look like it's, you know, it's going to fall off at any moment. And then I went around the edges of the label, making it even darker so it would blend in slightly better with the jar. I just felt it just needed that little touch of colour just to make it a little bit darker. And like I said, on camera it does look lighter, but in real life it is actually a slightly darker label than that. I kind of like how that corner ripped as I was painting it. That kind of added to the effect. That was like a happy accident, as it were. And then once I'd made sure the label was secure, I got some of that fake mossy stuff that I've used on the mandrake and the jar. And I decided to add a little bit of the fake moss stuff to opposing corners of the label. To make it look like the label's been there for a long time, and just add to it. And it makes it blend in a lot more with the jar and fit in more with the jar. And that's it. That's how I made the label for my mandrake. I've still got to figure out how I'm doing the leaves, because the leaves are quite long on a mandrake, on mandrake root, and I haven't figured out. You have to excuse the noise. There's someone who keeps going up and down with a motorbike, quad bike thing. So yeah, I haven't figured out how to do the leaves yet, but I will figure out how to do that soon. So that's the label for now. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.